Hello there.
Hey, how are you? Sorry.
I'm good. How are
Technology.
you? I am here with Tim Schumer. Now, you are a veteran-owned HR and you do things very unconventional. And I feel like that happens because of who you are and your background. And so tell me a little bit about like how you got started in this space and why it is you love so much doing this for the clients that you have.
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me here, Dina. So, yeah, I got started in HR after the Army. And when I was in the Army, I didn't do anything with HR. I didn't even know what HR did, quite honestly. I thought I'd join the Army when I was like 19, I'd retire, but that didn't work out that way. Ended up being medically discharged after my last tour in Iraq. And I had to find a new job because, physically I wasn't going to be able to do very much coming out the gate. So I ended up meeting with a couple of guys at a career fair. The Army does when you're exiting out. They have these career fair type things and like a day in the life of. And I don't like long lines. And everybody was like lined up at Secret Service, FBI, Seattle SWAT team, all those things. And there's like two guys in suits standing by a table. Nobody was talking to them. So I was like, oh, let me see what these guys are doing because they don't have anybody waiting. So I ended up talking to them, and they were HR executives and told me what they did. And I felt like a lot of what I did in the Army was very much like human resources, even if I didn't know that's what it was called, because you spend your whole time training, developing people. You help them with their personal lives, even. I mean, it's a very committed relationship in the military especially when you're a supervisor of any kind. And I just felt like this is something I could get into, and that's what I did. I ended up getting my first corporate job, Wayland Security, working in a corporate office and payroll and benefits. Built a lot of good relationships there. Got my master's degree in HR development from Webster, and just kind of kept going. I really liked what I was doing, and along the way, because I'm just such an innovator in my head, and I always got these thoughts going on, I had been developing this idea about like how to kind of functionally train managers and get them in the right headspace of what they needed to do. And
Yeah.
it started to dawn on me on a few things that I was doing in the Army is that just like there's times where you got to help them with their personal life. There's times you got to help them with their marksman score. There's times you got to get them physically fit. And there's times you have to teach them technical aspects of how to do a proper PMCS on a vehicle. And but as a manager, you have to approach different things, right?
Mhm.
And at first, it was like leader boss. All right, there's times you got to be inspirational. There's times you just got to be accountable. And chief came a little bit later. And that was when I was working with an engineering company. And there's actually a particular guy that does come to mind every time I think of this story as to how I came up with chief leader boss instead of just leader boss was because there's a tactical aptitude towards being a manager. And in each one of these elements, you have something that you will naturally default to, or what we call your forte. And there's also a potential, and then there's a burden. So you have three elements of being a manager. One of them you'll be great at, one of them you'll probably be okay at and possibly good at, and then one that you might be able to develop, but more than likely it will always be your burden. And it's more to do with some of the hardwiring and personality that you have, or just desire in some cases, right? And so that's kind of how I got into human resources was from the military. How I got into figuring this out all the years of just working in corporate, training managers, watching how things kind of unfolded and realizing that we all have a very good way to approach this. And the model are the model is how I started it. Framework is what I call it now because it's you can easily expand on it, collapse on it. You can customize it to your environment how you want to by just using the basic principles of being always knowledgeable, always inspirational, and always accountable. And that is the basic of being a chief leader boss.
I love it. Now, and that really brings me to the point where like you've heard that saying like you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And so in your experience, there's times where you as the specialist looking from outside in, you can pick apart and see those things that like, oh, we could be doing this and this would raise morale or you know what I mean. So how does someone know that they need your help?
Well, everyone needs my help, whether
All
they know
right.
it or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, There are many companies, many managers. There's tons of people out there that do leadership, management of some kind, and there are people that are good at it, and they're very in tuned to what's going on around them, and they naturally know how to do this and kind of jump in. For those that don't, it's very difficult to express to them they have a problem when they don't know they're even looking for one, right? So I like to find people that feel like their management isn't what they want it to be. And then I can kind of start working backwards from there of like, well, if you woke up tomorrow and it was what you wanted it to be, what would it look like? And let's start from there. And let's find out how much reality exists. I mean, obviously your dreams don't always come true to the exact T that you want, but they come close, right? You can manage around that. And that's kind of what I do with them is I like to work backwards from where do you want to be, and then we can design the road on getting you there because it is possible to do, but it's a huge discipline. One of the things I tell people when I'm training folks is that if you want to have any hope or chance to ever develop, you have to have these three things: discipline, desire, and devotion. You can't have two of the three. You have to have all three because if you don't desire to be taught, you're not learning anything. Period. That's one of the most basic things. If you're not devoted to it, you'll never stay good at it, even if you are in the short term. And if you're not disciplined, you're just not going to capture and put an order to what you're trying to learn. And so I find that if you can get people that have that, you will always be able to help them and develop them to the next level and, push them forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so profound the work that you do. There's tons of people that offer HR services, human resources, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of avenues that you can explore in the umbrella, right?
Hmm.
But tell me a little bit about what makes your approach and your offerings far unique versus someone else who's offering HR services.
Well, I'm an outside the box person. I always have been. I think the Army really opened that up for me, to be honest. I mean, everybody's experience in the military is different. Mine was profound. It was very helpful in my life at the time.
What makes you unique?
Me, there it is. So when I was in the Army, though, I thought out of the box all the time. And I remember thinking of different ideas that just weren't part of the Army culture, even. And when I got into corporate America, I found the same thing. In every business, every industry, there is a general culture across the line. You go into manufacturing, you find that from one manufacturing plant to another, pretty much the same, from a culture standpoint. They
Mhm.
they all have the same mentality. Same thing in logistics, same thing in public accounting. It doesn't really matter the industry. And so I tend to find a way to break down barriers that others won't try, things that have been accepted as draconian into the industry. And so I like to break those down and just offer up an alternative idea. I give you a really good example, Dina. So for years, decades, you're familiar with SMART goals, right? It's been
Yes.
the standard in creating performance management for years. It is a great system in general, right? What makes it great though is that it stood the test of time, and it is a simple way to like create goals for people. And what I found is watching a bunch of managers try to do SMART goals is one, you do actually have to be kind of smart to do SMART goals. And not everybody uses SMART goals the same way. And it's because SMART goals is a statement that produces a different result based on the person interpreting it.
Mhm.
I came up with this notion of what I call whole goals. And whole goals is basically like SMART goals. In fact, it's pretty much exactly the same, except for we changed everything in the form of a question. So
Mm.
instead of like, specific goal, we say, what is it you want to do to contribute to the organization? Right? Answer that question. And when we did that with some supervisors in the company I was at, it changed the game on how we did performance. They loved that because it was like now they weren't trying to come up with an answer to a statement, they were coming up to an answer to a question. Kind of like when you ask me a question, I'm coming back with an answer. That's kind of how it should be, and we find that makes it easier. So it's these like little things that we come up with, and it's always based on the environment that I'm in, right? Every client is unique. It's what makes my business model hard to explain to some people because for me, I love my clients' business as much as they do. And so I get in there and I want to know, okay, how do you talk to each other? Be real. I'm not talking to anybody. I sign confidentiality and non-disclosure statements, but it helps me understand like what they're doing so I can really get in there and evaluate issues, come up with different things, And I would say to answer your question even further, what makes me really different is I don't follow trend. I don't do trend. And the reason I don't do trend is because that's exactly what trend is. Trend is what's cool and popular today. You'll waste a
Mhm.
bunch of money and time on that, and it'll go nowhere. And then you'll spend a bunch of money and time to undo it to do the new trend.
Yeah.
Trends are, you want to be careful watching the trends and who's pushing them forward and why, because some trends are good and others are questionable at best. I like taking the trend that is there and trying to figure out like, okay, does this make sense for you first off? And if it does it make sense to do it this way exactly, or do we need to modify it to fit your environment? A really good example of this was DEI. Is
Mhm.
we're seeing that kind of crumble and crash. I never fall into that because the way it was always presented with data, I always challenged the data and nobody could ever answer my questions. So quite honestly, from my view, it was nothing more than nobody ever really proved it to me. And I've welcomed anybody to. I don't have a problem with DEI. What I have a problem with is any idea where nobody can explain to me how they got to where they're at on the solution. And that just has not been proven, at least to me.
Yeah.
And so, I had a client that was asking about it. I'm like, I don't think you're looking for DEI. The way they were explaining it to me, they were looking for something that told everybody that we want diverse thought. We want diverse backgrounds. They weren't trying to fill in like a race category or anything like that. They were trying to diversify the team from, okay, this person is very accommodating, where this person's a little bit more bold, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you want to build a team like that because, I did this with a client recently. I helped him hire a couple of people. We basically hired yin and yang. One
Mhm.
person is highly accommodating. The other person's a little more aggressive. And I'm like, between the two of them, you have your excellent customer service for the softer situations that are easier. And then when you need somebody to just take a good swift kick in the boot, but you got her and she will go and make sure they get that delivered. So, it's good to balance out teams with the right kind of people and personalities that can kind of get into each situation. It's how you really create the ultimate team, really. And that's another thing I love doing. I love building teams, working with them, coaching them, and kind of explaining to them. This is one of the reasons I started doing assessments, like explain to them, like, this is who you are on paper, right? It's not necessarily who you are as a person, but it is who you are when you work. Now, this is how your teammate works. How do you think you could come together and build something unique out of that? Because
Mhm.
you should be able to complement each other. I wouldn't ask an overly aggressive person to go have a soft conversation with a distressed employee. I would ask my accommodating person who's got the personality of mom next door to go do that.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of makes the team unique. And you can always bring the very aggressive employee with them, like, hey, maybe learn something and stuff like that. But you have that luxury is the point, right? So
Mhm.
those are some of the things that I think make me different is that I really don't do corporate canned responses or
Yeah.
even solutions. I'll take from my experience, pull in things that are relevant to that, but more times than not, there's not a single solution that I do the same time every time. So,
Yeah. None of that cookie cutter stuff, huh?
that's right. Yeah, you can't. I
Yeah.
love cookies, like for me, but
Yeah.
not in my solutions.
Right? That is so profound. And each business is unique, and so are the people that run it, you know?
Yeah.
And so treating them as such instead of trying to make them fit into a mold is so profound and really helps with the strength of the company and organization. And so some of the things that you do are, talent development and helping people grow. And how has Chief Leader Boss been such a great framework in that space?
Well, it really kind of brings down to, especially for like senior management. I experimented with this a lot when I was at a global manufacturing company and just kind of using it in the background really to test like my theory ideas with it. Where I found it is like there's no wrong manager for a company per se, but there is such thing as a manager that can't go beyond a certain place. So
Mm.
in chief leader boss, you can think of it as a ranking. Chief, leader, and boss. Chief is again all-knowing, technical expert. Your leader is all inspiring. These are the people that you mostly relate to in a corporation from a leader point of view. Is it's this constant, I got to be inspiring, got to have vision, got to push that out. And that's true, but that isn't necessarily what is required for every management position. And then you have your boss, which is always accountable. And I was very careful. And Dean, I'm gonna go off a side trail here. I chose the word boss very carefully when I was building this model. And the reason is because I see on LinkedIn all the time all these memes of a leader does this, a boss does that, and they were always painting the boss to be like this really mean person. And I'm like,
Right?
you know, that isn't really a boss. That's an a-hole, right? You don't want that
Right.
person working for you at all if that's who they are, how they're going to be. So a boss is the fine line. It is a firmer position. Your boss is the in the model or in the framework and how we explain it. Boss is the person that has no trouble with difficult conversations. They
Mm.
are unwavering and they're really good on teams that have discipline problems, particularly, or they need exacting outcomes. Like they don't have luxury to let people learn and fail. They have to deliver. This has to go out. Your boss persona in the workplace, those are the folks that'll do that. They're not always liked, they're respected, but they get drowned into being like a jerk in the workplace when that's really not who they are. They're just not willing to waver, and it gets mistaken to think that. But to kind of go back into chief leader boss, the profound thing that comes with that in your organization is a chief, we like to see somebody with either a potential or a forte of chief as a line manager. As a line manager, you're mostly teaching people how to do the job at the first line, right?
Yeah.
Supervisor is usually how we associate that, or they might call it a manager, but they're teaching guys that don't know the job how to do the job. They're supervising their work, making sure that it's correct and accurate or quality is met, stuff like that. As a manager at that level, you really have to have that chief. Good example of this, Tina, is this. If I was a manager at Southwest Airlines and I was managing pilots, but I didn't have a pilot's license, what kind of manager would I be, really? How am I supposed to teach guys how to fly a plane or what they did wrong if I'm not a pilot, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be it. But conversely, I could be the CEO of Southwest Airlines and never flown in an airplane.
Hmm.
Not likely, but I definitely don't have to know how to fly one. But that's where chief leader boss scales, is that understanding where somebody's at isn't necessarily a hardwire. They can develop and change and take on other fortes as they grow in their career. Because as you grow in your career, you have to be able to evolve from being chief as your primary forte to where boss and or leader needs to be. If you're up at the CEO level, the officer exec level, that leader is going to need to be a primary thing or at least a potential that you can draw onto because at that level you're producing more vision, communication, guidance. Your directors and managers below you will be your bosses and chiefs to enforce the rules, enforce everything getting done and push it down. But at a different level, you have to be that inspiring character to follow because that's what sets the tone. I know a lot of people like the bottom up approach, but the truth is the tone of the company is always set from the top down. And
Hmm.
so, and that's what makes kind of, in the chief leader boss, we kind of describe that like the output. What output do you expect from each level of management? We talk about what their focus is, the value. And when we think of value, not the value that they bring necessarily, but what they see as valuable, right? Our chiefs, those guys tend to be very in love with what the job is. They don't like the corporate reindeer games. They're not good with performance management because they see all that as a waste of time. They are interested in the work, the technical tasking. And that's okay at the first line. And this is where I use Chief Leader Boss, knowing that I know I want to target his development for the next level. And his next level most likely needs to have a bit of a boss focus. So if he was rating as a chief leader boss, we need to get that boss to come up to potential. But because if he was a CLB, as we call it in the rating, the conditional rating system, boss would be his burden and it's
Mm.
a lot to overcome. And so it takes a great deal of commitment and time. Biggest thing people forget about in training is time. It takes me
Hmm.
10 seconds to teach you how to do almost anything, right? I could teach you how to write a letter in Word. I could teach you the technical. Now, What takes time is consistency of doing that correctly every time, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to play the time game on development. And so there's no time like the present to start doing that now and little things.
Yeah. So you help companies really develop their leadership in these different ways. Tell me about, give me like a real example of how you leverage this and what it did for your client.
Yeah, so Chief Leader Bus has been experimental up to this point. So most of what we've done has been in like kind of in a controlled environment from that point of view. I did some live stuff in the early days with it, but again, Chief Leader Bus is the framework you use. The
Mhm.
training and development will always come from multiple sources. And I encourage even all my clients, like I can train people on certain stuff, but I encourage them to like, and even recommend people in my circle to like go to other people. You need multiple sources to get enough good training or development ideas and coaching from different sources because there's no one size fits all for any of this
Yeah.
stuff. And you need those multiple experiences. I feel like what's made me successful at not just this business but my career is that I have a very diverse background, right? I started working at 14, working on tree farm, right? Worked in fast food, retail. I went to the army. I was a combat engineer. That has nothing to do with HR, but all those different experiences is what brings me to where I'm at and how I'm able to like kind of tear apart and rebuild an entire, leader, manager, a process, anything, because I see all the outside things that others don't. And Chief Leader Boss helping to identify what you have will help you understand how to not only develop them, but how your organization should be structured. If you assess that you have a whole bunch of CLBs or BLCs, whatever you got, you want to be able, it's important to understand those because if you don't have anybody that's leader, this is how you make your next hiring decision. You want to
Yeah.
assess the next person like, okay, I got a bunch of this. I need some of this. And that's with any assessment, whether it's a chief leader boss assessment, whether it's cognitive aptitude assessment, a personality. It's important to like look at those variables in your organization because this is the ultimate groupthink, right? And this is
Yeah.
where people like they talk a lot about subconsciously, you hire people that look like you or act like you. I'm like, there's truth to that. I won't take away, but what people really subconsciously do, they don't even know it. It's not something you can even really teach them because their mind is already kind of falling down that road. And that is they really find people that act like them more than anything. It's like, okay, this person works like me, thinks like me. That's what they're really looking for. And because it's easy, they don't worry. They trust themselves. So if somebody's acting or mimicking them, they trust that automatically. And so
Yeah.
it's the easy road, no doubt about it. The hard road is like all things in life, the hard road is the best road and it
Hmm.
delivers the long term results. The short term result is hiring somebody that's just like you and
Yeah.
without any consideration or thought of well, who else is on the team, right? Everybody's trying to create team cohesion, but what they really end up creating is just, a team of people that will always get along because they all think the same way. And well, that's not really a good team. Some of my
Yeah.
best stuff in the army, and that's what I loved about the military. You could hate the guy next to you, and I did a lot of them. But I counted on him and I definitely trusted him downrange because at the end of the day, when you're downrange, the only color that matters down there is green, right? We're looking for the green boys. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the most profound things that you actually miss when you get out of the military, and it's actually kind of difficult, is you could always fight with the guy next to you, but you knew they had your back when it mattered the most. And that's all that ever mattered. So
Yeah. I love that that's, kind of the culture that you're creating in these
yeah.
businesses that you're helping too. The one thing that, like in all of the training that I've had, in all the things that I've done, and there's been a lot, I remember an organization talking about how quickly an organization gets disintegrated or falls apart when there's not the camaraderie and there's gossip and there's distension and so when you have a culture and you're elevating people, that seems to fall by the wayside. And then here you are with the cream of the crop, and they're up leveling their skills. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore they're not having a whole bunch of that, turmoil in the business, creating so much problem. And so part of that is raising up leadership, and that's what you're doing, and that's
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
profound.
I love coaching leaders. I love helping them. I definitely like getting into a company. Every company is like a puzzle to me. Every
Yeah.
client is a puzzle. I love getting to know them, where they're from, what they're thinking. I particularly like the smaller and medium business owners because they usually come to me with their arms up, just like I don't know what to do anymore. I don't even know where to start. Those are my favorite clients because I reverse engineer everything anyway, so not knowing where to start is actually a good thing. I'll tell you where the starting line is once I get done. But I really like helping out, particularly small businesses that are growing fast, even to kind of help them think of the things that they haven't thought of before. Human resource is one of those fields in like the human capital space. Everybody feels like they know how to do it. And I kind of attribute that to they took a class in college. It seemed like it was the easiest thing to understand, and it was. And everybody kind of feels like they just have the inside scoop on it. But just like accounting or operations or procurement or marketing or podcasting, there's a way to do this, and you should talk to somebody that's done it before you just go out and do it yourself, right? Because there's all the things you don't think of. And like I have a client right now, they are fantastic. They're my favorite client. I love them very much. I've worked with them now for the last 9 months on a project that was supposed to be 8 weeks, but again, once I got in there, we figured out that there was a lot more wrong than they even knew because they didn't know to look for it. And
Hmm.
that's what you get when you hire in or any consultant or professional, and particularly me, is that I'll ask those tough questions. I'll look into everything, and it won't come from a place of judgment. I don't like being that way. I don't. It's not about judgment. It's just you don't know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
my job is to help you not only understand it, but to know it and to think of it in the future for everything moving forward. One of the biggest things, like on the payroll job I was doing, they didn't realize they had to take local taxes. And I'm like, oh, you
Mm.
do. They
Wow.
will come after you for it too. And so,
Yeah.
because local taxes, I thought it was like county taxes and stuff. Like,
Hmm.
well, those aren't really required. I'm like, yeah, it is required, and you got to read the statutes because some locals will say it's optional, but pretty much most all of them say, nope, you got to do it, and we want our money every quarter. And if you don't pay it, they're going to fine you, and just like the state or the federal government does. So it's one of those things that getting in there, and then when we were doing it, I showed them how easy it was, and then they felt bad they never did it at all. They thought it would be complicated, but the software they used was very intuitive. And all you had to do was click a button and it would compare their work location to their residential location and assign the tax jurisdiction for you.
Oh,
So it was, yeah, again, one of those things. Did it feel like a great deal of time and money was spent on that? No, it really wasn't. But again, you end up getting that expert in front of you that can help you decide things, especially like on talent. One of the coolest things I've done, and I learned this from a very good former boss of mine. I loved working with this guy. He brought this to me, and I like to say that I took it and I ran with it and made it better, and I did. But we did this thing called talent review. It was fantastic. I think it was the most productive conversation about talent I had ever had in my career, anywhere, including the Army. And the Army, we had some good conversations. But this was a way to get an entire room, executives into a room, and we created profiles. We did a lot of work on this. It was like 3 months of work just leading up to it. We'd go off
wow.
site and we would talk about every single person, and we would talk pros and cons. Where is their strengths? Where's their weakness? Where can they develop? And what was it like for all the rest of us to work with them? And one of the good examples here was one of the leaders I remember talking in the meeting was saying about a particular guy that he supported for getting promoted. He was one of his best employees, one of his best managers, thought this guy was the future. And then when he was done, I remember the room was kind of silent, and kind of that uncomfortable silence, where everybody's like, where he thought he delivered something impactful and he's looking for his applause.
Yeah.
And I feel like I might have been the first one. I don't remember if I was, but I feel like I was, where I was like, I don't share your opinion. And I find it very difficult to work with this guy. And he never responds to emails. And somebody else piped up with a similar comment or their own version of their difficulties in working with this guy. The VP that was delivering that, he was shocked, but we weren't coming to him like, you're totally off your rocker, man, right? It wasn't from judgment. It was from a place of like, listen, I don't disagree that you want this guy to move up, but we got to get him here first. Right now, he doesn't have my support because he doesn't do anything I ask him. And if he's going to be at that next level, he's got to learn to work with HR or quality and control or all these other departments that are represented here too that work with this guy. And
Wow.
you know what? Afterwards, I remember talking to him, and he's like, "This is the most profound thing. This is the stuff we never got before." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "All we ever did was talk about how good somebody is. I never got to sit in a room with somebody with my peers that would challenge that." And it was great because now we got to go back to this guy and express to him, like, hey, people want to see you move up, but you're not. And here's why. And we got to give him some truth. And again, it's so important. I can't stress this enough. It is so important to not come from a place of judgment, but a
Yeah.
place of correction. And
Mhm.
like, I want to see you move up. This is what you're going to have to do, though, because you're not seen very favorably amongst the other execs that have to support this. And so give him a year later, and we talked about the same guy, and all of his ratings went up because we gave him meaningful feedback, some direction on how to correct it, and he started just doing it.
Wow.
That is the ideal manager right there. But you have to take these little steps and you have to have some honest conversations. I can
Yeah.
remember another one that they wanted to lie to a guy. He applied for a job, he wanted the job internally, and he was qualified and stuff. And when I was sitting in the room, because this was part of my job, we were talking about all the different candidates that we interviewed for this. Some were internal, some were external. I remember them saying, like, yeah, we don't want him. He's kind of difficult to work with. He doesn't, he's got this like holier than thou attitude. We're afraid what he's going to do in front of the customers because this was a job that was going to take him being more customer facing, particularly with one of our largest $100 million kind of clients, right? So you don't want to just hand that over.
Right.
But they wanted me to go back to him and say that something along the lines of, well, just let him know that, we appreciate that he applied. He was a great candidate. It was a tough decision. We had to make a decision. We went with this guy. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the truth. They're like, yeah, but we don't want to demoralize him. I'm like, I'll just handle this. So I did. I met with him one on one. I think I remember taking him into the cafeteria. I was like, hey, let me buy you a cup of coffee or something, soda, whatever you wanted. And I sat there and told him, I was like, listen, you didn't get this job. And he was bummed. He's like, "Ah, man, I really thought for sure this would be my time." And I'm like, I'm going to tell you why you didn't get it. He's like, okay. And I think he was just expecting that I would say the standard corporate speech, which was, sorry, it was very competitive, all the bullshit that we tell everybody.
Right.
And I was
Dance
like,
around it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't. I just said, listen, the truth is nobody trusts you around the client. You have a very tough way of talking and communicating. It's very razor edge, right? It's sharp and it's not taken very well. And they're not sure that you're going to communicate well with the customer and are quite frankly afraid that you might run them out. And we can't have that. What you
Yeah.
need to do is we need to get you into a place to start changing how people view you,
Hmm.
and then you can apply. Fun fact, 6 months into kind of working with this guy, there was a different position in the company that came up that was actually better than the one we turned him down for. And he ended
Yeah.
up getting that. He
Hmm.
interviewed very well.
He did the work.
They did. They recognized. And I remember saying something. I was like, listen, we have worked with this guy. He has done
Yeah.
so much better. I think he's worth your time to not only talk to, but maybe favorable shot towards the job. I didn't
Yeah.
make the decision. I just made a recommendation. And he ended up getting it, changed his life, and he was so happy. I remember him saying
Wow.
thank you. I didn't need to thank you, but it's always good to hear. Sometimes I like that I'm in a position where I can see the end result of some of the stuff I do. And
Hmm.
those are the most rewarding ones for me. I love seeing that where I can get somebody to transform. And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, the transformations come because we're honest with them.
Yeah.
And we reserve that honesty the same kind of consideration you would reserve for a close friend, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
you don't have to be mean or rude. You just got to be
No.
honest. They
Hmm.
will dictate maybe how you proceed. Some people, there will always be somebody that just runs off the deep end and like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And I always say, I'm like, that's actually good when they react that way. And somebody asked me one time, he's like, well, why is that good when they freak out like that? And I'm like, lets me know that I was right and I don't have to worry about developing them anymore because that is not somebody I want running stuff that just loses their shit over a little bit of feedback. So
Right.
it's actually a kind of a multi-purpose tool, and I like to find multiple purposes in some of my stuff that I do. It's always a pro and a con, right? So
Yeah. That's amazing. Wow. And so profound in helping businesses grow in so many different areas and raising up that skill level, you know?
mhm.
And so you are offering a complimentary discovery call. So any business
Absolutely.
get
Yeah,
a hold of you. You will do your best to help them discover what it is they don't know or where they need your help, right?
that's right. Hey,
Yeah.
Dina, I'll tell you, my new tagline. I came up with this the other day when I was writing some instructions for one of my clients. Is like, if you don't know where to begin, just call Tim.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is awesome. And they can get a hold of you on your website, nextlevelhumancapital.com.
Yep,
They can visit you on LinkedIn. You're at linkedin.com/in/Tim Schumer.
that would be me.
Yep.
And
So
you can email. Yeah.
we'll put
Yeah,
those links
absolutely. They
below.
email, phone
Yep.
call, just even a message on LinkedIn. I check that regularly,
Perfect.
whether through the company or just my personal LinkedIn. I love having a good conversation. It's absolutely free of charge to talk out what you're thinking. And we will always find a way to move forward with our clients the best we can and accommodate what they need.
Wonderful. I so appreciate you being here today with me, Tim.
Well,
Thank you for
thank you for
sharing your
having me. This is so
expertise.
much fun. I hope I get to
Yes.
come back and do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you have so many other products. Chief Leader
Yes.
Boss is just one of them, but you have so many amazing tools to help business owners in profound ways. So I so appreciate your time, your energy, your expertise. I know that you are so passionate about what you do. You and I have had multiple conversations. I know that you are so passionate about elevating others, and that just shines through. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you again for having me. This is, like I said, a lot of fun. I love doing this kind of stuff. I look forward to another invite sometime. And in the meantime, yeah, Chief Leader Boss and more coming every day.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.